I was standing in that bank lobby, counting the last $23 in my wallet, when the manager told me I owed $600 just to open my grandfather's old safe deposit box. At 49 years old, I was broke, jobless, and my Uncle Roderick had just stolen everything my grandfather built. But what I found in that box, it proved my uncle had been lying for 15 years. My name is Desmond, and this is the story of how a forgotten safe deposit box brought down a $500 million empire of lies. I'm standing there in my only decent shirt, the one I saved for job interviews, sweat stains already forming under my arms from the 4-mile walk because my car died that morning. The bank manager's looking at me with that particular mix of pity and impatience that people reserve for those who can't pay their bills. Around us, other customers are conducting their normal Tuesday business, having no idea that my entire family's legacy is about to pivot on whether this woman chooses mercy or protocol. $23. That's what stood between me and the truth about why my grandfather, Floyd Reeves, the man who built Fleet Forward Logistics from a single rusty truck into a transport empire, supposedly left everything to my Uncle Roderick and nothing to the rest of us. Not to me, his grandson, who spent every summer in his trucks. Not to my sister Nadine, who he taught to do the books when she was just 12. Not even a mention of my father Jerome's children after he died serving his country. The safe deposit box had been sitting there for 40 years, accumulating $15 in fees annually, like some kind of time bomb ticking away in the vault of First National Bank. My grandfather opened it when I was 9 years old, listing me as the secondary holder, though I never knew it existed until that audit letter arrived 3 days ago. "Mr. Reeves," the bank manager, Mrs. Cromwell, said, her voice professional but not unkind, "I understand this is difficult, but the fees must be paid in full before we can release the contents. $600, that's actually quite reasonable for 4 decades of storage." Reasonable. Sure, if you haven't been unemployed for 3 months, if your checking account isn't showing negative $17, if you haven't already sold everything valuable you owned just to keep the lights on and buy your daughter textbooks for her final semester of college. My Uncle Roderick probably spent $600 on lunch yesterday. The man who inherited everything, who sold my grandfather's company last year for $520 million, who told us at the will reading with a straight face that we were never mentioned, that Grandpa Floyd wanted only him to carry on the family legacy. "Is there any kind of payment plan?" I heard myself asking, hating how small my voice sounded in that marble lobby. Mrs. Cromwell glanced around, then leaned forward slightly. "What's in this box? That's so important?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I didn't even know it existed until your audit letter came. But it's the last piece of my grandfather I haven't lost to my uncle's lies." Something shifted in her expression. She pulled up something on her computer, frowning at the screen, typing rapidly. The sound of her keyboard clicking felt like a countdown timer on my family's last chance at justice. "When did you say your grandfather passed away?" she asked. 15 years ago, February 2010. "And this box was opened in 1984? "According to your letter, yes." She looked at me again, really looked this time, like she was making a decision that went beyond bank policy. I saw her notice my worn shoes, the careful way I'd folded my $23 on the counter, the photo of my grandfather's truck I'd been carrying in my hand like a talisman. What happened next changed everything, but to understand why a 50-year-old safe deposit box could destroy a $500 million fraud, you need to know about Floyd Reeves, the man who taught me that a handshake was a contract, and that family meant more than money. You need to know about Uncle Roderick, who wore $1,000 suits while his brother's family struggled. And you need to know about the day 15 years ago when we sat in a lawyer's office and learned that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. My grandfather used to say that patience was just another word for hope. Standing in that bank, down to my last $23, I was about to learn he'd been playing a longer game than any of us imagined. He'd been patient for 40 years, and now his hope was about to pay off in ways that would send shockwaves through corporate boardrooms and family dinner tables alike. I never thought I'd be starting over at 49. 3 months earlier, I'd been laid off from my job as a warehouse supervisor when Brennan Distribution decided to automate half their operations. 22 years of perfect attendance records, safety awards, and employee recognition plaques meant nothing when a robot could do your job cheaper. My savings had evaporated paying for my daughter Aubrey's college tuition at State University. She was in her final semester, studying business administration, determined to be the first in our family to graduate with a 4-year degree. "Dad, I can take a semester off, get a job," Aubrey had offered when I told her about the layoff. "Absolutely not," I'd said, putting on the brave-faced father's perfect over years of practice. "Your education is the one thing nobody can take away from you. We'll figure it out." But figuring it out meant selling my truck, emptying my retirement account with massive early withdrawal penalties, and eventually moving from my 2-bedroom apartment to a studio above Kowalski's hardware store that smelled permanently of paint thinner and had pipes that groaned all night like ghosts of better times. My grandfather Floyd would have been ashamed to see me like this, not because of the poverty, but because I'd let it happen without a fight. Floyd Reeves had started with less than nothing in 1968, just a borrowed truck and a handshake deal to haul furniture from a local factory to retailers across state lines. He'd sleep in that truck 3 nights a week to save money on motels, shower at truck stops, and eat cold sandwiches my grandmother Dolores packed in old butter containers. By the time I was born in 1975, Fleet Forward Logistics had 12 trucks and a warehouse outside the city. By my 10th birthday, it was 30 trucks and 3 warehouses across 2 states. Grandpa Floyd never forgot where he came from, though. He still drove truck number 1, the old Peterbilt he'd bought with his first profit, keeping it running with spare parts and stubborn pride. "Desmond," he'd tell me during those summer rides, teaching me to shift gears on empty back roads, "wealth isn't measured in what you have, but in what you can give. Remember that when I'm gone." I remembered everything about those summers. The smell of diesel and Old Spice that followed him everywhere. The way he'd buy coffee for lot lizards at truck stops, treating them with the same respect he showed bank presidents. How he knew every driver's kids' names, their birthdays, their struggles. Floyd Reeves built an empire on the radical idea that business was personal. My father, Jerome, had been Grandpa's oldest son, a Marine who did 2 tours in Iraq before coming home to work dispatch at Fleet Forward. He married my mother Willa when they were both 25, had me a year later, then my sister Nadine 5 years after that. Dad was supposed to take over the company eventually, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up, just like Grandpa had. But life had other plans. A drunk driver ran a red light on Highway 47 on a rainy Thursday night in 2005. Dad died instantly, they said, which was supposed to be a comfort but never was. I was 30, Nadine was 25, and Mom became a widow at 54. Uncle Roderick came to the funeral in a Mercedes, checking his BlackBerry during the eulogy. He was 5 years younger than my dad, but seemed to come from a different universe entirely. While Dad had gone to community college and then the Marines, Roderick went to Wharton for his MBA. While Dad worked at Fleet Forward learning the family business, Roderick became a VP at Cromwell Investment Partners in New York, managing hedge funds and speaking a language of derivatives and leveraged buyouts that might as well have been ancient Greek to the rest of us. "Such a waste," I heard him tell someone at the reception. Jerome had so much potential. He said it like driving trucks was beneath our family, like the empire Grandpa Floyd built with his hands was something to be ashamed of. But Grandpa heard him too, and I saw something change in his eyes that day, a calculation being made, a decision being filed away. 4 years later, when Grandpa got diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer, Uncle Roderick suddenly became very interested in the family business. He took a leave of absence from his firm, moved back from New York, and installed himself at Grandpa's bedside like a devoted son. "The company needs leadership during this transition," he announced at a family meeting in Grandpa's living room. "I have the expertise to ensure Fleet Forward survives." Mom, still grieving Dad and overwhelmed by Grandpa's diagnosis, just nodded. Nadine was pregnant with her first child, dealing with her own struggles. And me? I was working as a shift supervisor at a distribution center, making $40,000 a year, and thinking Uncle Roderick was sacrificing his Wall Street career to help the family. We were all so naive. Or maybe we just wanted to believe that family meant something more than opportunity. Grandpa Floyd died on a cold February morning in 2010. The hospice nurse called at 6:30, and by the time I arrived, Uncle Roderick was already there, making arrangements, taking charge like he'd been preparing for this moment. He stood in the doorway of Grandpa's room, blocking my view, cell phone pressed to his ear, as he talked to funeral directors about premium packages and expedited services. "I need to see him," I said. "The funeral home is on their way," Roderick replied without looking at me. "There's nothing to see." But I pushed past him anyway. Grandpa looked peaceful, finally, after months of pain that no amount of morphine could fully erase. His hands, those massive hands that had built everything from nothing, were folded across his chest. Someone, probably the nurse, had dressed him in his favorite flannel shirt, the red and black one he wore for Sunday dinners. At the funeral, Uncle Roderick delivered a eulogy that would have been beautiful if you didn't know him. He spoke about legacy and family values, about honoring the past while building for the future. He actually cried when he talked about learning to drive on Grandpa's trucks, though I couldn't remember a single time he'd actually done that. "Dad always said family comes first," Roderick concluded, gripping the podium. "I promise to honor his legacy and protect what he built for all of us." My mother squeezed my hand. Nadine wiped her eyes. Even I felt something like hope that maybe losing Grandpa would bring us together, that Roderick had finally understood what mattered. 2 weeks later, we gathered in the conference room of Hutchison Law, a firm that had handled Fleet Forward's legal matters for 20 years. Mr. Hutchison, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who'd known Grandpa since the early days, looked deeply uncomfortable as he shuffled papers on the mahogany table. "I want to begin by saying how sorry I am for your loss," he started, not making eye contact with any of us. "Floyd was a remarkable man." "Thank you," Mom said quietly. "He thought highly of you, too." Mr. Hutchison's jaw tightened. He picked up a document, his hands slightly trembling. The last will and testament of Floyd Raymond Reeves, dated December 15th, 2009. December 15th. Just 2 months before he died, when the cancer had spread to his brain, when he was on so much medication he sometimes didn't recognize us. "To my son, Roderick James Reeves," Hutchison read, his voice flat, "I leave full ownership and control of Fleet Forward Logistics, all associated real estate holdings, equipment, contracts, and assets, as well as my personal investment portfolio and all remaining property." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. "What about the rest of us?" Mom finally asked, her voice small and confused. Hutchison cleared his throat. "There are no other beneficiaries named in the will." "That's impossible," Nadine said, her hand protectively over her pregnant belly. "Grandpa always said the company would be split between his children. Dad would have gotten half if he was alive." "You were never mentioned in the will," Roderick said, his voice carrying that practiced sympathy I'd heard at the funeral. "Neither were Desmond or Nadine. Dad felt I was the only one qualified to preserve and grow his legacy." "But Jerome was your brother," Mom said, tears starting to fall. "Floyd loved him. He wouldn't just forget his grandchildren." Roderick slid a copy of the will across the table. There it was in black and white, Grandpa's shaky signature at the bottom, witnessed by 2 nurses I didn't recognize. "Dad made this decision when he was clear-minded," Roderick said. "He knew I had the business expertise to take Fleet Forward to the next level. He wanted to ensure the company survived and thrived." "This is about money," I said, finding my voice. You convinced a dying man to change his will. Be very careful about making accusations you can't prove, Roderick replied, his mask slipping for just a moment to reveal something cold underneath. This will has been properly executed and witnessed. Any challenge would be expensive, lengthy, and ultimately futile. Mr. Hutchison wouldn't look at any of us. He just kept arranging and rearranging his papers while Roderick explained how he'd be generous, how he'd make sure we were taken care of with a small severance payment, $25,000 each, enough to cover funeral expenses and transition costs. That's conscience money, I said, standing up. You stole everything and you're offering us crumbs. I'm offering you more than you're legally entitled to, Roderick said. Take it or leave it. Nadine was sobbing now. Mom sat frozen, staring at the will like if she looked hard enough, different words would appear. And I realized that Uncle Roderick had won before we even knew there was a fight. Over the next 15 years, I watched from the sidelines as Uncle Roderick transformed Fleet Forward into something Grandpa Floyd never would have recognized. He fired drivers who'd been with the company for decades, replacing them with contractors who had no benefits, no security, no loyalty. He sold off the old trucks, including Grandpa's original Peterbilt, to collectors and scrapyards. The local routes that had been the company's backbone were abandoned for more profitable long-haul contracts with corporations that squeezed every penny from their vendors. The financial press loved him. Roderick Reeves modernizes family logistics firm. The headlines read, "From trucks to tech, how Fleet Forward became a $500 million algorithm." Mom died in 2021, never recovering from what she saw as her father-in-law's betrayal. She spent her last years in a nursing home that Medicaid barely covered, while Roderick bought a $15 million estate in Westchester County. Nadine moved to Oregon with her kids after her divorce, cutting ties with everyone, too hurt to maintain connections that reminded her of what we'd lost. And me? I kept working warehouse jobs, each one a little worse than the last as automation ate away at the industry. I raised Aubrey alone after my wife Cheryl left, unable to handle my bitterness and anger at how things had turned out. Every Christmas, Roderick would send a card with a $1,000 check. His signature flourished across the bottom like he was doing us some great favor. I cashed them because I needed the money, but each one felt like swallowing poison. Then, 3 days ago, everything changed. The letter from First National Bank arrived on a Tuesday, mixed in with past due notices and grocery store circulars. I almost threw it away, thinking it was another credit card offer I couldn't afford to accept. But the return address caught my eye, the embossed seal of a bank that had been around since Grandpa's time. "Dear Mr. Desmond Reeves," it began, "we are conducting a mandatory audit of dormant safe deposit boxes as required by state banking regulations. Our records indicate that Box 4047, registered to Floyd Reeves with you listed as secondary holder, has not been accessed since its opening in 1984. 1984. I would have been 9 years old. The same year, Grandpa had taken me on my first real trucking run, a 3-day haul to Chicago and back. The same trip where I'd helped him change a blown tire in the middle of nowhere, refusing his offer of $5 because, as I'd told him, family helps family for free." The letter continued. "Accumulated annual fees of $15 per year, over 40 years total $600. Please remit payment within 72 hours, or the contents will be transferred to the state as abandoned property per Banking Code Section 1500. $600. It might as well have been $6,000. I had exactly $23 in my wallet, -17 in my checking account, and a maxed-out credit card that I'd stopped answering calls about. But something about this safe deposit box, something about the timing, the fact that my name was on it, made my hands shake. I called the bank immediately. The customer service representative transferred me to Mrs. Bethany Cromwell, the branch manager. "Mr. Reeves," she said after I explained the situation, "I can see the box in our system. Opened August 15th, 1984, by Floyd Reeves. You're listed as secondary holder, with full access rights upon the primary holder's death. But I was 9 years old then. Why would he put my name on it? I couldn't say, sir, but the fees must be paid in full before we can grant access. Can I set up a payment plan? I recently lost my job and things are tight right now. There was a pause. I'm sorry, Mr. Reeves, but bank policy requires full payment. You have until Friday at 5 p.m. 72 hours to find $600. I hung up and did what I'd sworn I'd never do. I called Aubrey. Dad, what's wrong? She answered, because I never called during her classes unless it was an emergency. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. I just need a small loan, $50 if you can spare it. Dad, you paid my tuition when you didn't have it. I can Venmo you right now. Is 50 enough? The shame burned in my throat. It's enough. Thank you. Next, I went to Gary's pawn on Riverside, carrying my father's watch, the Omega Seamaster he'd worn in Iraq. Gary, who'd known our family for years, offered me $200 without haggling. His way of being kind. You sure about this, Desmond? This watch means something. It's just for a few days, I lied. I'll be back for it. I sold plasma twice, $40 each time. Cleaned out rain gutters for Mrs. Patterson next door for another $50, posted on TaskRabbit for any immediate jobs, and got hired to move furniture for a college kid, another $100. By Thursday night, I had $570, still 30 short. That's when my car, my ancient 2004 Chevy Malibu with 237,000 miles on it, decided to give up. The transmission had been slipping for months, and it finally went completely on Friday morning as I tried to start it. The mechanic at the corner quoted $300 minimum just to look at it properly. I laughed, sitting in that dead car at 7 in the morning with 5 hours until the bank's deadline. It was either cosmic cruelty or cosmic humor, and I chose to laugh rather than cry. I walked 4 miles to First National Bank, my good shirt soaked with sweat, carrying $570 in various bills stuffed into different pockets because I'd been paranoid about losing it all at once. The August heat made the sidewalk shimmer, and by the time I pushed through the bank's revolving doors, I looked like someone who'd been fighting a losing battle with life, which wasn't far from the truth. Mrs. Cromwell was waiting at her desk, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She watched me approach, saw me pull out the crumpled bills, saw me count them twice, before admitting defeat. 570, I said. I know it's not enough. I sold everything I could. My car died this morning, or I'd have sold that too. Is there anything, any way you could work with me? She looked at the money, then at my face, studying me like she was reading a story written in exhaustion and desperation. You walked here? She asked. 4 miles. My daughter needs the car when it's fixed, if it can be fixed. She's got an internship starting next week. I straightened up, trying to salvage some dignity. Look, I understand you have policies, but this safe deposit box might be the only thing my grandfather left directly to me. My uncle took everything else. Your uncle? Roderick Reeves. He inherited Fleet Forward Logistics, sold it last year for $500 million. Her eyebrows rose slightly. And you're here with $570 trying to pay a $600 fee? Family's complicated, I said, which was the understatement of the century. Mrs. Cromwell turned to her computer, typing something quickly. Then she stood up, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a physical ledger, one of those old leather-bound books banks used before everything went digital. She flipped through it, running her finger down columns of handwritten entries. Mr. Reeves, she said slowly, there appears to be an error in our system. According to this original ledger, the fees for Box 447 were prepaid through 2025, 40 years in advance, paid in cash by Floyd Reeves on the day he opened it. We both knew she was lying. Her kindness was so unexpected that I had to grip the edge of her desk to stay steady. The audit letter was sent in error, she continued, her voice professional but her eyes warm. I apologize for the inconvenience. Would you like to access your box now? She led me to the vault, a massive steel door that belonged in a heist movie. Inside, hundreds of metal boxes lined the walls. She used her master key along with the key that had been mailed with the audit letter and pulled out box 437. "I'll give you privacy," she said, showing me to a small viewing room. My hands trembled as I opened the lid. On top were 50 gold Krugerrands, South African coins that gleamed despite 4 decades in the dark. Each one was dated from the 1970s. I knew enough to recognize these were worth at least $2,000 each, possibly more. Beneath the gold was a certificate for 1,000 shares of Apple stock, purchased on September 13, 1985. Original IPO shares, never sold, never split. My mind couldn't calculate what they'd be worth now, but it was millions, many millions. At the bottom lay 2 envelopes. The first was marked, "To my grandson Desmond, to be opened only in the presence of injustice." The second, smaller envelope said, "Read second." I tore open the first letter. Grandpa's handwriting, shaky but determined, filled 2 pages. "Desmond, if you're reading this, then Roderick has done what I feared he might. During my illness, he brought papers constantly, claiming they were treatment authorizations, insurance forms, power of attorney for medical decisions. I was on morphine, fentanyl, barely conscious most days. I signed whatever he put in front of me because I trusted my son. Later, during a clear moment, my nurse Beatrice showed me what I'd signed, a new will leaving everything to Roderick. By then, I was too weak to fight a legal battle, too close to death to spend my last days in court, but I wasn't too weak to plan. The gold was my father's, your great-grandfather's. He never trusted banks after the Depression, kept this hidden from everyone, even my wife. The Apple stock was a gamble I took with cash, keeping it secret because I wanted something outside the company, something Roderick couldn't touch or even know existed. But here's what matters. On October 15, 2009, I recorded everything. 90 minutes of me explaining what Roderick did, how he did it, what my true wishes were. Beatrice witnessed it, notarized my statement. That recording and all documentation are in a sealed file at Hutchison Law. Tell Hutchison to open the Fletcher contingency file. He's been waiting. The company was always meant for you, Desmond. You understood what we built. It wasn't about money, but about promises kept, workers treated fairly, handshakes that meant something. Roderick wanted wealth. You wanted work. There's a difference. Use the Apple stock to fight. Use the gold for your family. Use the recording to restore justice. I'm sorry I couldn't fix this while alive, but sometimes the longest route is the only way home. Your grandfather, Floyd, P.S. I put your name on this box the day you helped with that tire and wouldn't take money for it. You were 9. You said family helps family. You remembered what mattered. You always did. I opened the second envelope with shaking hands. It was shorter, written in the same week he'd opened the safe deposit box in 1984. Desmond, I knew you'd find this when the time was right. That's the thing about truth. It waits patiently for its moment. By now, you've learned that patience and justice are old friends. They take their time, but they always arrive together. Remember that your children deserve to know their great-grandfather loved them, even from beyond, especially from beyond. I drove straight to Hutchison Law in Mrs. Cromwell's personal car. She'd insisted on lending it to me when she saw I was planning to walk. The old lawyer's face went completely white when I walked into his office and said 5 words. "Open the Fletcher contingency file." "Thank God," he whispered, and for the first time in 15 years he looked me in the eye. "I've been waiting for you to walk through that door every single day since your grandfather's funeral." He retrieved a locked metal box from his office safe, his hands trembling as he opened it. Inside were 3 DVDs, stack of notarized documents, and medical records showing exactly what medications Grandpa had been on when he supposedly signed the new will. "Why didn't you say something at the will reading?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Roderick threatened to destroy my practice if I revealed this, Hutchison admitted. He had connections, powerful clients who could have ruined me overnight. Your grandfather knew this would happen. He told me to wait for you, that you'd find the safe deposit box when you were ready to fight. He said, justice delayed isn't justice denied if it protects the innocent in the meantime. We watched the recording together. There was Grandpa propped up in his hospital bed, clear-eyed despite his illness, speaking directly to the camera. Beatrice Yarrow, his hospice nurse, sat beside him, holding his hand as he detailed everything. How Roderick had visited only when he needed signatures. How he'd waited until the morphine was at its peak. How he'd guided Grandpa's hand when he was too weak to hold the pen properly. My true will, Grandpa said on the recording, divides Fleet Forward equally among my grandchildren, with Desmond as executor. The company was built on trust and should be run by someone who understands that trust matters more than profit margins. The Apple stock was worth $12 million after all the splits and growth. Not the $520 million Roderick had gotten for the company, but enough to hire the best legal team in the state. The mediation took place 6 weeks later in a conference room overlooking the city. Roderick arrived with 4 lawyers. I had 2, plus the recording, plus Beatrice Yarrow's testimony via video link from her nursing home in Florida, where she lived at 91 years old with a memory sharp as surgical steel. You can't prove that will was forged, Roderick shouted when he realized we weren't bluffing, his composed executive mask finally cracking completely. We don't have to prove forgery, my lead attorney responded calmly. We just have to prove undue influence on a medicated, dying man. The recording does that beautifully. Or we can go to trial and let a jury of working folks decide who they believe. The grandson who worked warehouses, or the son who made $500 million off his dying father's signature. The settlement was sealed, but I can share this much. My daughter Aubrey graduated debt-free and started her own nonprofit helping other first-generation college students. She's getting married next spring and money won't be a concern. My sister Nadine came back from Oregon, opened the restaurant she'd dreamed about since culinary school, and named it Floyd's Table. Every Friday, she serves free meals to truckers, honoring the people who built Grandpa's dream. I started Floyd's Promise Logistics with 3 trucks and 5 drivers, all former Fleet Forward employees Roderick had fired. We're small, but we're growing the right way, the way Grandpa would have wanted. Every driver gets benefits, profit sharing, and respect. Their kids' names go on my office wall next to their photos, just like Grandpa used to do. Uncle Roderick still has his millions, living in his Westchester mansion. But last month, his son Garrett called me out of the blue. Uncle Desmond, he said, I know what my father did was wrong. I want to learn the business the right way, from the ground up, the way great-grandpa Floyd would have wanted. I hired him as a driver. He's actually good at it, shows up early, treats the senior drivers with respect. Last week, he helped change a tire on the highway and wouldn't take extra pay for it. Family helps family, he said, and I had to walk away so he wouldn't see me tear up. Mrs. Cromwell, the bank manager who chose kindness over policy? I went back to thank her properly. Turns out her own father had been cheated by a business partner decades ago, left with nothing but debt and regret. Sometimes, she told me over coffee, we get to be the kindness we once needed. She was right. That $600 fee she waived didn't just open a box. It opened a door to justice that had been waiting 40 years to swing wide. I keep exactly $600 cash in my office safe now. Not for security, but as a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of mercy can topple empires built on lies. And if someone ever comes to me needing help, needing that one break that changes everything, I'll be ready. Grandpa Floyd was right about patience, and justice being old friends. They took their time with Roderick, but when they finally arrived, they brought the whole truth with them. And truth, as it turns out, is worth more than $500 million. It's worth being able to look your daughter in the eye and tell her that integrity isn't just a word in a mission statement. It's worth sleeping soundly knowing you've earned what you have. It's worth everything. The company motto at Floyd's Promise Logistics, painted right on our trucks, is simple. Family helps family. Not because we're all related by blood, but because in the end, that's what Grandpa's legacy was really about. Treating everyone like they matter, because they do. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for what was rightfully yours, or witness justice taking its sweet time to arrive, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that truth always finds a way, even if it takes 40 years and a kind bank manager to unlock it. And if you want to hear more stories about families, justice, and the unexpected ways life balances its books, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, sometimes the longest route really is the only way home.